Welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Project podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Ruse, and here at Momentum, we aim to challenge and champion committed men who are ready to take charge of their lives by mastering their mind, optimizing physical potential, and unlocking their power to find their mission. Whilst our work is predominantly with men, we hope that this podcast will provide value to all who choose to listen. So without further ado, let's jump in.
And a huge shout out to our first sponsor here, Be Spunky, the Australian men's health brand designed to support you to be the best you can be. Now, Blake Genoa and myself have been using this for quite some time now and absolutely love it. This product is something that we take every single day and drastically improves our training. But the one thing that I've noticed is my recovery time and the way that I feel the next day after training is so much better when I'm taking Be Spunky than when I'm not. And it is scientifically formulated to support optimum male hormone levels vital for strength, drive, and overall well-being. So big thanks to Be Spunky. You can find the link in the description below.
As with any conversation I have with my friends, I thoroughly enjoy them. Today I spoke with good friend and mentor, Andrew McUtchen, father of 4, and the owner and co-founder of the Fatherhood, an unbelievable brand and company that aims to support and help fathers on their journey in fatherhood. As always, if you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, share, and tag us on Instagram at The Momentum Lifestyle. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Thank you and enjoy. Andrew,
hello, Dylan.
Thank you for
I'm
your
really
time,
well,
mate.
It's good to be here. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, not as close as usual.
No, I miss our watch events at Time and Tide that you guys put on, and I miss getting dressed up and pretending like I know what I'm talking about with watches with my 30-minute little Google search that I do on whoever the client is that you've got.
Longines, the head of Longines has never forgotten that discussion where you asked her about tourbillons. It was very impressive.
Oh mate, I you know what? I probably picked it up from Dad. Just the ability to quickly. All right, let's just learn how to talk and talk fast, and hope that they don't, pick up on the bullshit. So, how you been, mate? You been well? How's business? How's life? How the kids?
Look, it's probably a little bit different for you over there. You escaped the wrath of Victoria and Australia, which was no mistake. I'm pretty sure you and the old man had a plan to escape from LA, escape to LA.
Yep.
So, no, for us, there's been a sense of sort of emerging from a really how do you say it, like some sort of abyss where there was no time and there was no progress, there was no context, there was just the 4 walls of your family home for a very long time there. So emerging from that, I think we all felt a sense of renewed hope, and I think we all, we looked forward to re-engaging with the life that we thought that we'd known before. But then there was another lockdown, and that was that broke a lot of people. I think I was speaking to a friend last night that we're all feeling tired, and we feel like our rhythms have been really upset by that second big out of the blue lockdown. So again, maybe we're emerging for a second time with again trying to find some optimism and hope. I mean, I don't lack those things as a rule, so I tend to bounce back into it. But it's been a really strange time. But however, I would say on the point about families and the kids and fatherhood, which is very much my favorite topic, it's been a transformative time, and we can talk more about that over the journey. But it's definitely, you can't even measure how transformed the whole parenting experience is for people that went through that with kids. It's good, and it's not all good. It's certainly not all bad, but it's been I feel like the relationships I have with everyone in my family are just vastly different to before it all that went down.
And you managed to get through it unscathed? reasonably
Uh,
unscathed?
yeah, I think some of the habits you formed in the first lockdown needed to be lost, which were
Yeah.
that there was a sense of, because for me it was unscathed. So look, physically, I think I had a lot more time to work out, and I was able to build in a really nice structured workout routine that probably got me in the, it was funny because I think there was my degree of decadence was matched by how much I was training as well. So I managed to sort of keep it on a par. But then the weather started getting nice, and the restrictions eased, and then I had to peg it back in again because suddenly, everyone in our part of the world was having beers by the pool, and after a really strict lockdown period, I was I let it go for a while. But I think unscathed, definitely the family unit's probably stronger than it was before in many ways. And business wise, look, we're lucky to be in digital media, and when everyone was bored and stuck at home and unable to do anything else, they were reading about watches and reading what we were putting out. So I feel fortunate that we were able to probably, potentially even benefit from the fact that people had more time on their hands. But certainly watch brands have gone through existential terror over the last 12 months. They've absolutely had their foundations shaken. Some brands are unicorns. You probably know them, the recognizable ones. At a time when currency is really unreliable and money's cheap, people put their investment into things that are recession and pandemic proof, and certainly brands like Rolex, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, they're absolutely pandemic proof. They've only appreciated in value through the period. So there's two sides to that coin, but many brands in my space, there'll be brands that just disappear off the face of the earth after this. We're
big
seeing that with
too.
Big brands. The bigger the brand, like generally the strong brands, it's an unfortunate thing that in a recession or a pandemic, the strong get stronger and the weak just disappear. So that's no different in the watch industry.
Yeah, exactly right. And for you, I mean, I've kind of, tried my best to, from an objective point of view, look at how everyone's traveling, and obviously more closer to home, reaching out to people and seeing how they're going and trying to connect as much as I can. Obviously, due to the nature of my work, it's super, super passionate piece of who I am. How I've really noticed that probably your age group specifically got hit the hardest. Those with young kids. The young kids come home from school now. They're at home, 24/7. There's no breaks from the kids. You've got to work from home now too. You and your spouse are back, both home, and then also the uncertainty of what happened with business. So many people who ran their own businesses lost their businesses. So many people who were doing well, and never really had to financially struggle, then found themselves, without a job. So how have you managed to go through it, you and your circle of friends? Like, what's been the biggest challenge for you that you've had to overcome over the last 12 months?
There were lots of sort of surface challenges, but really the fundamental challenge is just practically how do I work like this? How do I find a space that I can control in a chaotic family environment? So we were fortunate, and again, I'll just talk nuts and bolts here. It's not very sexy, but we were able to have
two kids, correct? You've got two girls.
Three
girls.
You forgot Neve. So I've got 7, 6, and 5. I've got 7, 6, and 5-year-old.
A very easy age group for you to handle.
Oh, just easy. Self-contained. They just
they look after themselves.
Just leave me in a room, and only the strong survive.
Exactly.
No, it was really the challenge was just how the hell do I do a Zoom call with a Swiss watch brand CEO without a child, leaping on me from the rafters and a dog chewing my ankle, and we were lucky to have a nanny come in during the days, and I was lucky that I'd made the tree change before it was trendy, Dylan. Everyone now wants to move to to the
You did.
the
You
Mornington
did too.
Peninsula. And you remember this? Remember I
Yeah.
was onto this.
Yeah,
I'd already
you're the
moved out of
trendsetter,
the
mate.
burbs. That's it, mate. So we moved out to Mount Eliza, which is about an hour out of Melbourne. And to me, there was this huge disparity in value. We won't get into property, it's you and your dad's pet subject, but no, there was a real good value in buying out here at that point in time.
Yeah,
and we got an acre of land and all the good stuff. So we were already kind of set up, ready for an apocalypse. We just thought, you know what, I can patrol this perimeter with an automatic weapon and make sure the zombies don't get in. I was ready.
Exactly, mate. Let's not rule that out. Let's not rule out the zombies.
Mate, what month is it? I think they're scheduled to come next month. I'm just arming up.
I'm getting ready to move to Texas, mate. That's probably the safest place in the world from a zombie apocalypse.
Absolutely. I think there's a movie where it's set in Texas for that.
Exactly, yeah.
So look, we had the practical stuff somewhat sorted out, but then I was really lucky because I was getting to a point. I had this pool shed that was like, I think it was, what is it? 3 meters by 2 meters. It's a tiny little pool shed and it's just filled with chlorine and pool toys. So I cleared that out and got a tradie mate to come in, and he made it look like a little Hamptons. It looks like a Hamptons bathroom. Actually, it's very, very small. But I was able to turn that into this lockable space where I could lock myself in there and just Zoom anywhere in the world. And from that little vantage point, I filmed a bunch of virtual watch fairs. We launched a watch for a brand called Zenith, one of the greatest movement manufacturers in the world. We launched a watch that was meant to be only available from their manufacturer in Switzerland. So we were able to launch that virtually. So I was able to achieve a lot from, thanks to conferencing and that lockable space. That was the key, Dylan. If you've got kids and you've got a place that you can keep them out of and just always have, just keep it as it was when you left it, when you leave the day's work, then you're golden. So I had that, we had a nanny, and we survived.
Yeah. So the big part was just the difficulty with having the kids, basically just having the kids around, and how do you actually work in an environment.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And like, because we had a nanny, and look, Dylan, there's a lot of guilt that you can opt in for as a parent. I just choose not to. A lot of parents would be sitting here saying, "Oh, I should have. I was a terrible homeschooler," and I'm like, you know what? This is a weird time in our lives. I'm not going to add a layer of guilt about the fact that I'm not, what's that movie with Robin Williams in it? Where he's the teacher? The classic movie.
Yes, I do. One of my favorite movies.
Of course you do. Anyway, I decided I wasn't going to put pressure on myself to be that guy, as well as the entrepreneur and the husband and everything else. So I just outsourced everything to the nanny and said, you know what? Teach them some stuff. If they learn, that's great. If they don't, we're learning a lot on a daily basis. I'm not going to add the academic burden. So I frequently opt out of guilt, Dylan, as a parent, and that's a really good advice for future parents. It's up to you how guilty you feel.
I love that, mate. I think too the analogy that I use is when we are down, we want to help ourselves up. Like, so if we're adding guilt on top of we're in a pandemic, I've got to continue running my business, I've got to be a good partner, I've still got to be a good dad, and it's in a time and under circumstances that no one could have possibly prepared for. What service or what purpose does adding guilt on top of it? It doesn't actually help you then fulfill all those other roles that you do need to be able to fulfill, and you need to keep going. And so I think one thing that a lot of parents can take out of that is dropping the ego of needing to be the superhero parent, whether that's a superhero mum or a superhero dad. It's like, you can't possibly do it all. And the old saying of, it takes a village to raise a child, or it takes a village to raise an idiot, or whatever the saying is. We then became so cut off from people due to COVID restrictions that we lost the, like, hey, mum and dad, can you come and help me, right? Hey, uncle and aunties, come and take the kids for a while. We had to do it all ourselves. So I think the fact that you were able to remove the guilt and put your hand up and go, I'm just going to get a nanny. Like, I think a lot of people can learn from that, because I think a lot of people do things just for the sake of like being able to show that they did things. And, like, who's doing a better job of parenting? The parent who
outsources to a nanny and then has more time and energy for their kids when they're actually present, versus the parent who's then just anxious and stressed 24/7 because they've got to do it all, and doesn't form, a healthy relationship with their kids over the 12-month period or the 6-month period, whatever it was, when kids were getting homeschooled. So I think, yeah, I mean, mate, hats off to you, and obviously it works. I follow you avidly on social media, and it looks like things are going well from a home unit. How did your relationship with your partner change over the course of the last 12 months? Because we saw divorce rates absolutely skyrocket, so many added stresses put onto relationships. And, I'm very fortunate that my circle did some did really well and some really struggled throughout it. So how did you guys go, and how did your relationship, I guess, change or evolve over the last 12 months?
Oh, it's good that we're drinking buddies. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
didn't. That was really handy, especially in the first lockdown, because
Yeah.
the tone of it for me, like, I'm the sort of person that I like a crisis.
Mm.
I'm the sort of guy that the drama of a crisis, the excitement of it, it really appeals to me. I'm an odd unit in that way.
You're a
Some people,
masochist, mate.
oh, it's just exciting. Like, so much of life is a grind and it's repetition, and but anything where something unexpected like that happens.
Mm.
So for the first little while, we really just we wrote. The other thing that happened was I just had this creative explosion, because I think when you're jolted out of a sort of a numb reality of get in the car, drive to Cremorne,
Yeah.
talk about watches, get back in the car, drive to Mount Eliza,
Yeah.
make dinner, have a glass of red, fall asleep, repeat. You can feel quite desensitized when you get into any kind of routine. Whereas this was just so new and so different that for the first lockdown, we were both kind of wide-eyed at, wow, we sort of felt life was really acute again. Everything was really quite, and I think the perspective on what mattered and what didn't, all those things became really clear. But our relationship, because hopefully I'm not giving too many of my wife's secrets away, but we're hedonists as people. We really, it was just like being, we just stocked up and had a really fun time with the kids. And there was no sense that the world was passing you by. Like, often when you sit still and everything else keeps moving, you get that sense of shit, FOMO and what if someone's overtaking me? And whereas in that first one, we both just kind of sat there in it, and just we were showing up for the family every day. We were there from dusk till dawn with the kids for many weeks and months on end. And that was a good period. I think the second lockdown was much harder. It was much colder. It was winter. And I think that you sort of see each other at your most frayed, just because there was no breaking of the seal. Like, there was, when you go, even the commute, like, so we ended up through the fatherhood, we were constantly in touch with a big community of dads just saying, how you all doing? Where's the pressure? Where are the cracks starting to show? Yeah. And it's funny that so many dads came back and said, God, I missed the commute. I just didn't realize how important the commute was.
Yeah.
That's so weird. Like, you look at your life before lockdown and say the commute, well, you listen to a podcast or whatever it is, it's just kind of killing time. Whereas what all these dads realized in the second lockdown in particular, because I think everyone enjoyed the first one, everyone smashed it and made home cocktails at midday. It was all like getting away with it. But in the second one, when it got really tough, it was what people started to miss, and what they realized was important in their lives was these abilities to look back on your family from a distance, whether that's from the office or from your workplace, or if you're an Optus technician, you'd be up a telephone pole, and you get to see life from different perspectives, and you break the seal of how intense family life can be. And without that was tough, because you really couldn't even really leave your property in the second lockdown, and it was just freezing cold. And that's when I think, if you can see your partner and see each other at your worst, and then I would often, when I yelled at the kids the loudest, which I do frequently. So again, feel normalized, feel completely comfortable with that side of yourself, dads and mums. It's normal to do that.
Yeah.
But when I would be hard on the kids, that night I'd be lying in bed and Fed'd say, "Are you asleep?" And I'd say, "No, I'm just feeling so bad about shouting at the kids." And she's like,
Yeah.
it wasn't that bad. You're not bad. So I tend to be harder on myself than she is on me as a
Yeah.
dad. And that's again, it's a sign that it's a good thing for both of you to be self-rating, kind of going, "Oh, that wasn't a great performance today with the kids." And then the other parent goes, "Nah, there's plenty worse." So again, there's you'll see a theme here, Dylan. I just think one of the breakthroughs of the fatherhood of being a dad for me, and I hope I can talk to you early in your fatherhood journey and say, "Mate, this is all that matters."
Yeah.
There is no benchmark for fatherhood. There is you are innately born with the ability to be a great dad. You don't need to read any books. Like being you, you'll be curious. You'll go and seek a lot of information like I did. But I still took me probably 6 months to realize that I could just dad it my way. And my brand of fatherhood is very different to anything I've ever seen. And it's built around all the things that I know I'm good at and that I like to do. So I think, again, I've managed to, in my journey, take away a lot of that pressure, a lot of the expectations people put on themselves, and a lot of the guilt. However, if I've been short-tempered in the day, I will at night lie there kind of beating myself up a bit. But I think if she'd have turned on me and said, "Yeah, you were awful," which does happen occasionally. We say that to each other. You pull each other up, but generally we're harder on ourselves than we are on each other, which I think is a good sign of a relationship.
Absolutely, definitely. And I think that's one of the biggest learnings I've had as I'm getting older and older, and my relationship with my parents changes. You do start to go, okay, they're human. They're human beings. There's nothing overtly special about them, or we tend to really hold our parents to high standards. And as we get older and we form probably friendships with our parents, is when we start to go, oh, okay, they make mistakes too. And I think the greatest thing that any parent can do is admit their mistakes to their kids and go, hey, I did stuff up. That was a wrong decision. That was a wrong call, or I am sorry. And you want to, a parent's main job is to create adults eventually, right? So you want to treat them as such, right? You don't want to treat your kids as kids their whole lives, because then you're raising kids to just be kids, and they're not going to be functioning members of society for any number of reasons. So one of the biggest learnings that I have as I get older is just going, okay, I should probably forgive mum and dad for that one argument they had with me when I was 7 years old, and I've been latching onto it for 20 years, or and understanding.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, because if you hold them to those super high standards and still judge them as not meeting those standards, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Whereas if you say early on, my expectation of a parent is that essentially they're human, they're compassionate, and that they're flawed, then that's something you can be. I'm sure you'll be quite good at being flawed. I know you're a compassionate guy. And that's why you'll see my pattern is that I'm definitely a flawed human being. I'm a flawed father. But I don't set a standard of perfection. I think as long as, and you've got to decide what success looks like for you in fatherhood. And for me, my eldest in particular is particularly bonded to me ever since she came through. We've just been two little spirit buddies. But her coming up to me randomly 3 or 4 times a day and just wanting to give me a hug, it's like, I'm doing great, man. If my kids are choosing to come up to me, and look, they're at an age where they're not going to do that when they're 15. That'd just be weird.
Just wait.
But I'm enjoying it while I can. But they're the things. If that's happening, then it's like, I don't care. I'm doing something right.
So what are your we tend to take on so much of society's expectations of how we should show up, and parenthood's no different. What are your metrics for success, I guess, when you do? Like, is it those small moments where your kids are connecting with you and you get to take a step back and go, yeah, this is cool. I'm doing my best and I'm doing a good job here.
I think if I look at kids whose parents there's a real paradox here, Dylan, that I think I've just got to call it out. Sometimes the worst parents create the best kids.
Yeah.
and the taskmaster parents create these kids that not only are phenomenally talented, but then are much more compassionate on their kids because they don't want to recreate the cycle. So
Yeah.
I'm painfully aware that by being quite different to the way that I was raised, it's just this pendulum constantly swinging back between the two. So look, the metrics for me, to put it simply, are that they do see the human side of me, and that I don't only project some sort of a, like you talk about the masks. I don't want to give them a father mask that is always, always strong and always, I'm showing them the gamut. They've seen me cry. They've seen me laugh till the tears came down my face, in as well as sob uncontrollably at the existential terror of COVID on my business in lockdown too.
Yeah.
They've seen it all, and they've seen that I'm not afraid to be a fully rounded human being, and that self-expression is a healthy thing. Whatever you're feeling, you shouldn't. So there are basic things in there that I think are setting them up for success. But the metrics for me are definitely that if they can get a sense that they're lucky, and that they are surrounded by love, and that they're aware of that early, and that's not necessarily what everyone has, then that's enough, because when you're kids, you're so unaware of other people's experience. You really live in this little bubble with your parents in this little house. You think everyone's house is like yours. I'm sure you kind of had that early world view where, everyone's dad drags you around to the footy all the time, or
Exactly.
I can go into any locker room. I mean, geez, isn't Papley everyone's best mate? Actually, he's probably after your time. It would have been Paul Kelly or something. Yeah,
that was just. I think I'm older than Papley, to be honest.
Exactly. Sorry, mate. I underestimated your age. No, it would have been God, Paul Kelly. Do we go back that far? Anyway, you would have thought that was normal, and it's hard to make your kids aware of other people's experience, and without doing the whole poor kids in Africa thing, or without really broad stroking it. I think my kids they really are aware that they live in a pretty happy and harmonious house that's full of music and craziness, and that they don't really have a tiger mum or a tiger dad. Like we're just not putting that pressure on to achieve to because the other thing is, Dylan, like what is a successful career professional going to look like in 10 years? I think the best thing I can teach them is how to make a buck out of any situation as an entrepreneur, because if they're looking at the world through an entrepreneurial lens, then all this stuff about, did you do your reading today? Did you do your maths? It's like, for me, I'm already getting a sense that if I can teach them to look for opportunities and be fluid and be ready for all the changes, then that'll be the ultimate, probably, sort of success grounding, as opposed to the academic model, because it's the world we're going into is just in flux. It's madness.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to switch, I guess, away from Time and Tide, which is your watch business that we spoke about briefly at the start, and really start to focus on parenting and parenting tips. What drove fatherhood for you? Did it take you to become a father, or has it always been a passion project to you, where you were like, oh, geez, I'd love to help out men, and I don't really know what that looks like, and now that I'm a father, oh, cool, I can step into this space. Tell me about the journey that took you to realizing that fathers need a forum or a space to connect with other fathers.
Yeah, that's a frank question, and I have an answer that sounds quite shallow, which may not surprise you, Dylan. But there's obviously depth here. But really, I didn't have any interest in helping men as a group out before I became a dad. I didn't really have any sense of what that would look like. I knew Adam Garoni quite well, who started Movember, and I went over to LA with GQ and got to know how he'd built that up. And I'd seen some amazing things happen, but there was no real drive for me, and there was no sense of where that could be. But the shallowness comes in was that I realized when I became a dad that brand dad was a train wreck. The brand of fatherhood was absolutely misaligned with my, like it was I was expected to buy
the
New
Simpsons, the Phil
I was expected to,
Dunphys.
I was expected to get a gut and buy New Balance and start grilling. Like that. That's if I believe what was being what. And I love all those things. I love grilling. By the way.
Yeah.
I definitely don't. I can't even wear New Balance. Ironically, though, unfortunately, that's just not for me.
Well, but no, you've seen in the last 5 years the rise of the dad bod, which is even 20-year-olds that have beer guts. It's like, oh, you got a dad bod. It's like, what? Hang on.
That's all part of a pattern of negativity and and this stigma around fatherhood. But once I became a dad, I was like, and then the funny thing was, and again, time and tide comes back into the story, is that, and I think I've told you this, that I was sent off on this early I had 2 kids under 2, and my wife was delighted when I said, hey, honey, I'm going to Monaco for 10 days. And I went and spent, and I spent like a week on this boat in Hercules Harbour and for the Grand Prix. And on this boat was Jason Bourne and
Matt
Thor
Damon.
and Matt Damon and Chris Hemsworth. And once we'd broken down all the, the barriers of, how are you? What are you doing? What's going on? We just talked about fatherhood for days straight. And I'm looking at this from a brand lens and from an outside, just going, oh my God, if people were listening to us talk about fatherhood, brand dad would be elevated beyond belief. Everyone would want to be a dad. So then I called your dad and I said, hey, Rosie, what do you reckon about fatherhood and what happens in a footy club when people get pregnant? And he's like, oh, it's just all bad. Everyone just says your life's over. And, all those footy kind of, those cliches get bandied about. But again, it's all negative. And he's like, oh, totally. He was really on board straight away going, oh yeah, I reckon I think dad needs a rebrand. Yeah. So a chat with him then led to this tagline of, let's go. Dad needs a rebrand. So me and 2 other guys just jumped into it. So for me, it was to me, the most exciting project as a storyteller, a journalist, a brand guy, a marketing guy is give me a rebrand. Give me something that's really shit. Give me something that has potential and I'll take it from here to here. So I was really inspired because then the other thing was, right, like, without going on about it too much, I mean, I was hitting all these highs in my life after fatherhood. I realized that it gave me so much more focus because I had a little unit that I had to protect and create wealth for, and I had to put him in a nice house. And so I had all this, I was like, this is the best phase of my life. I'm still the fittest I've ever been in my life. And I'm 44. Like I didn't get anywhere near this fit in my 20s when I had all that time and all that metabolism. When the fire was burning a lot hotter, I was throwing junk at it. I was just like, here, have another 20 beers. Whereas,
exactly.
So I genuinely felt that I wasn't going to be misleading you. If I said to you, mate, your best years will begin when you're a dad, believe it or not. I 100% believe that when I say that to you, I'm feeling it. I'm like, the best years of your life. Yeah. And again, that's not to say that if you don't have kids, you're not going to hit the highest highs. It's not necessarily that kind of a statement. It's more that if that happens to you, instead of that fear and that sense of fuck, I'm gonna lose relevance, I'm gonna lose conditioning, I'm not gonna be cool in any way again. I got news for you. It's you've got a better shot at all those things in fatherhood. Yeah, so definitely. It's a pretty shallow answer. I answer this differently depending on the audience. But this is kind of unfortunately the shallow truth is that I just saw a brand that was in disarray, and I was like, I want to help. And then of course it's got so much deeper. We did the book. We learned how catastrophic the situation is for fathers in terms of policies, in terms of divorce, in terms of in terms of just sheer society. Like when I put myself down as a primary contact at school, they call my wife, they call the nanny, they call my wife's mother, they call my mother, and then they call me last. I'm like, I put myself down first. They're like, but dad's usually so busy. So it's systemic. It's part of it's the fabric of society. Yeah, has women as the primary carers, and we have to fight to get a shot. Even if we're opting in for it. So it's become way deeper than that initial moment where I'm like, I reckon I could rebrand dad. That would be my contribution to the world. So it started at that point, and then we're in the battle, we're in the fight. And we've got amazing corporate partners now that are, and interestingly, L'Oreal, for example, 80% of L'Oreal are women. They are 110% in for the battle, because they know that it's until it's remarkable, until it's unremarkable for a woman to come back to work after maternity leave, it'll remain remarkable for a dad to take paternity leave. So we've got there are these things that by boosting dads and by giving dads more opportunities to be the primary carer, women are going to be unchained. They're going to be off the leash, and they'll be back in the workplace. Their career paths will be unchecked by parenthood, because as it is now, women generally, their careers suffer or essentially end when they start having kids, and that doesn't help anyone, because men start work away from the kids, and on the cycle goes.
Yeah. It's interesting because you talk about the brand of fathers, and there's an awesome guy that I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the last 2 years by the name of Sean Coffin, who runs The Modern Bloke. And his tagline is the brand of man, and changing the brand of man, because similar to all the things you've touched on, the brand of man needs such a reboot too. The way that society portrays men in any role is not very good at, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. And you talk about it being a shallow drive at the start. I wouldn't even look at it as a shallow thing, because we at Momentum, similarly, the three of us, Blake, Noah, and myself, we all started Momentum because we saw such a lack of culture of guys getting together to champion and challenge each other to do more in their lives, to be better. There was nothing really out there that was appealing to us as, everyday average blokes. There's so many good people doing a lot of work in the men's space, but certainly nothing that appealed to, I just want to dip my toe in the water, or I just want to see what these spaces are about, or I just want the connection side of things that didn't involve, going off into the woods and getting naked and dancing around with a bunch of strangers, right? That was typically what was available to men in the men's space. So we, similar to your backstory at the Fatherhood, we were like, well, we need to step in here and do something, because we'd love to have a group of guys around that are on the same wavelength as us. And then from there, the depth grew, and the understanding around, the struggles that men do go through, and how little it is talked. Like, it could not be spoken about little on a greater scale, the struggles that men do face. Mental illness, suicides are starting to get spoken about a lot more. But even the more work and research I do, you mentioned, policy and laws, and, around custody battles. The court system in Australia and across the world is really heavily geared towards supporting the mother and giving mother custody, and they get to look after the kids, and the fathers are often left, devastated with visitation rights. It's bizarre that that's kind of how we've fallen into as a society, because again, for me and for us at Momentum, you look at, especially for young boys needing a father figure, you look at the number one contributing factor to young boys leading into antisocial behavior, long-term delinquency, and then eventually criminality. The number one factor is fatherlessness. It's not having not necessarily a lack of a father, but a lack of strong father figures in their lives that can go, hey mate, here's some order, here's some structure to your life. We're going to pull you in line, and this is how you need to behave. And obviously, to the detriment of a lot of young boys as well, is having a poor father figure, which then skews it that way as well. So having healthy, father figures is so important to society in general. And it's interesting when people try to split it into a one-sided debate, or as if it's not going to also positively impact mothers and women and daughters. Like you talked about the L'Oreal piece just there around, it's actually going to, if we can improve the stigma or deter the stigma around stay-at-home dads, that's actually going to really benefit women in the long run, because
absolutely.
So this idea that it's one against the other, and again, going back to what society does, it loves to pin us against each other in these odd little debates, and not often big debates. And I think you bring up a really good point around, we're a team, we need to come together. And How can we uplift women? How can we uplift men? How can we destigmatize what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, and get rid of the negative things? Because that's essentially what, growth is figuring out what are we doing poorly, how do we change for the better, no matter what side you're on. And there's almost like an either or. You're either a feminist or you're either for men's rights. And it's like, man, what happened to just equality? Like, can't I just be for equality now?
Well, in this parenting space, and I've never really verbalized this before, but it's just becoming clear to me as we speak, is that it's just this notion of the primary carer being female that so many systemic, so many of society's structures, whether that's divorce, whether that's that scenario where the primary school just won't call me.
That's bizarre. That's bizarre,
I've said, I'm the primary carer, call me, please. But then there's all these other numbers, and they're like, okay, well, he'll be busy.
Bizarre.
There's so much stems from that idea and this is why the primary carer gets preferred in a court case. As in, that's the mother, and again, there's a real, if you were to say, what do we need to change fundamentally for everything else to sort of spill off that, it is this, if there was a notion in 20 years that there was no sense of a primary carer, that they were just co-parents, that immediately begins to that severely shakes things up, because you're then able to, you then sort of say to each couple, so who's doing what? And essentially that's what modern couples, successful couples, sit down potentially. I mean, Fee and I sit down every week and say, right, what's happening this week? And we split it up. Okay, I'll do dinner these 4 nights. You do sports pickup this day. It's just we just divvy it up. There's no sense of, because you've got a vagina, you'll do this, and because I've got a dick, I'll do that. That's very much the old. But it's just, I think that sense of pardon the crudeness there, but I think there's just that sense of ground zero, and that there's no assumption of who's primary in anything. Unfortunately, it's a lot more work. Like, I've got to say, modern relationships require a lot more communication, discussion. There's a lot more, because you just can't make any assumptions. There's now that we've kind of nuked the expectations, you've got to piece it together yourself. It's quite manual. It's hard work.
I think too, like, the basic notion of communication being so important in that. I think whereas traditionally speaking, you could rely upon the traditional notion. Okay, we're married now, mum stays home, look at the kids, I'm going to go to work. It was not easy, but it was, I know my role. This is my role, and I'll go and do it. Now it's like, okay, every week we need to have a conversation. What's your role? What's my role? Who's doing what? It's like, you have a board meeting every Sunday night, right? You have to figure out your week.
Just lucky. So, ours is always catered, which is we that's the part of it that gets us to the table, is that we make sure there's a good bottle of red. But I'll tell you what, Dylan, if any modern dad ever tells you they haven't looked at Mad Men and felt a tinge of envy at 1 or 2 points, they're lying.
We've spoken about this before. Mad Men.
They're lying to you, because we look at this and you go, oh man, I was sleeping with my secretary. I was getting home late. I had it all my way. Like, men, that was a patriarchal society. And look, we're seeing now, I was watching Q&A last night. There is just this very rapid collapse, and I don't want to digress too much in case we trigger each other, but we are seeing the death throes of this patriarchal society everywhere we look now. And to me, wonderful. I'm 99% on board with everything that's happening. I think that we've had it way too good for too long. However, when I look at that and I'm like, oh, so I didn't have to have this board meeting every week, and it was assumed that I would work 40, 50 hours, 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, and sleep over at the office because I was drinking. It's just like, oh man, that would have been so much easier. However, Don Draper's relationship with his kids is terrible. They are known from a bar of soap. In the sad final seasons of Mad Men, you kind of say, all right, so it would be easier, but now I'm kind of seeing why. What the result?
Well, you see that. I mean, you see that in so many different examples of what's the right term here, of like glamorized chaos, I would say. And, and a more modern take would be The Wolf of Wall Street. Here's this guy, and every young man's looking at him going, wow, what a life. He's making lots of money, he's doing lots of drugs, and he's sleeping with lots of women. But there's the downfall. It's the complete downfall at the end. And in Mad Men, in Wolf of Wall Street, and any number of stories, the trade-off is so large, and the trade-off is so and that's where two conversations with men and women around, well, what do you actually value? Do you value making heaps of money, sleeping with lots of girls and doing all the drugs? Or do you value coming home at night with a partner that you have an amazing relationship with, that you can sit down with your kids, have an amazing relationship with? To me, that's what I value. And I've obviously come from a great family background where my mum and dad are still together. My dad made himself so available to us as kids, even though he was working. My mum was a beautiful stay-at-home mum and did so much around the house. To anyone who thinks that's not a job, go and spend a week doing what a stay-at-home mum has to do. That is not an easy, especially with two young boys, me and my brother.
Can I say something? Let me say something about that, because I just did a little research before, because there's a story I wanted to share with you, which was quite recent, that really gets into that. So there was recently a story in The Guardian, and the quote was, "I had no idea about the hidden labor. Has the pandemic changed fatherhood forever?" Because what the pandemic's done for dads is it has ripped off any blinkers they had about the house just kind of running itself. When you're living in it, and and obviously the house got so much messier with 5 people in it 24 hours a day.
Yeah,
it was just, if any dads were left out there with some sort of obliviousness to how hard it is to run a house like Tammy did, then they're not left wondering anymore. And that's where this article proposes that fatherhood has fundamentally changed because of this period of time, which is why, again, we come back to that point about the pandemic has done what maybe 100 years of incremental evolution might have eventually got to. It has done it in a matter of months, because parents are now equally aware of, if they weren't before. None of it was that much of a surprise to me, because you know, Fee and I had already kind of said, well, because we've done the whole 2-career thing, which is let me tell you, it is a shit show. If you and your partner are both going to try and have a career after kids, you'll be spending 25 grand a year per kid for daycare, up until school. And if you have 3 kids like us, that's a significant amount of money before you've even got off the bat to make your own. And you're going to be sharing the domestic load equally while you're working. So I was already very aware of the domestic labor, but this article is fascinating, because it's saying that it's like, when you said, if you don't think it's a job, it is. I think every dad out there is more aware of that than ever after the pandemic, and that's what that article says. So it's a really relevant comment.
Not every, but a vast majority of women have a good understanding of what the workforce is before they become a parent, right? They're out there working, they know what a 40-hour work week is, whereas no dad has really spent time at home alone looking after kids while the wife is out. So they don't have the understanding of, okay, this is actually what happens from a day to day. So you gain empathy through experience. You gain empathy through going through it yourself. And so it actually, you bring up a really good point around how is it going to change? And it probably has changed it, as you said, for, as much as 100 years could have done. And then what the implications of that's going to be. I think you'll find, a lot more men now are empathetic, probably putting their hand, and this would be in a good case, the men are putting their hands up and going, okay, I'm coming home from work, I'm exhausted, but I also know that my wife's basically worked all day. Let me give her half an hour, let me give her an hour to go have a bath or relax or read a book or something, to have some me time.
That's it.
So that's what you hope for, as any healthy male looking forward to the future. You hope that we continue to step up. And so back to your point around the microscope, or you said that you agree with 99% of what's kind of going on. The way that I frame it to the boys and to the guys that we work with is anything that holds you to a high standard is going to be beneficial. Like, if you can, regardless of how uncomfortable it is and difficult it is, like if you can reframe it from why is everyone so hard on men right now to, okay, how can I utilize this to become the best version of me, the best man, the best father, the best partner? How can I just utilize this? It's like a sportsman, they're put under such a microscope, and the good ones use that as a way to go, okay, well, I can't act like an idiot on weekends. That's probably a good thing, right? Like this idea that, oh, we're so tough on the sports stars, leave them alone. It's like, well, are you then encouraging the poor behavior that they're doing on weekends? Or like, what are you trying to say? Should we, like, we either think that it's poor behavior or we think it's good behavior, and we either want to teach, young boys and girls that this is acceptable or it's not acceptable. We don't want to push it under the rug and just go, okay, go do it, but do it in the shadows kind of thing. So it's almost the greatest thing moving forward for anyone is the microscope we're all under. And we've seen it, something that comes to mind is like the CEO that's naked on Zoom in America. Like, that's it. Like that wouldn't have happened without the microscope, right? I don't know if you saw that story because it was pretty big over here. It was so anyway. So that ability to then audit each other's behaviors and hold each other to higher standards is great. It then just becomes a question of, okay, what are the standards then? Like, whose standards are they? And that's probably the 1% where you're like, hang on, what's going on here? Who's setting the standards, or who gets to regulate and tell me how to live my life from a generalized point of view?
I think that the interesting point about standards and holding them is that, without getting political, certainly in this country, the standards that are being adhered to by our Commander-in-Chief, the most powerful man in Australia, I'm very, very happy to see that the standards that are being, because it's a trickle down sort of system, and certainly in politics, in Parliament House, the standards that are walked by, or what do they say? The standard you walk by is the standard you accept.
Yeah.
The standards that are being walked by in that building are atrocious.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that this week.
Yeah.
And again, we don't necessarily have to go down this path, but when you say what are the standards and what should we be held to and who decides, I do think that the wonderful thing about right now, and I'm loving seeing these guys cook on the barbie, because they are getting a grilling, and it's a good thing. Is that it's the standards that are being questioned, because if you can sexually abuse someone next to your boss's office, you're not that scared that your boss is going to come down on you very hard.
Exactly right.
It's pretty basic, and
you see the trickle down. As you say, you see the trickle down. Like, I've been really rocked to my core with all the private schoolboy accusations coming out, right? Like, I'm a private schoolboy. I went to Cranbrook, and I managed to see it before anyone else. One of my mates was following the girl, Chanel, and sent it to me. And so I managed to, I was scrolling through and reading, and Cranbrook boy. And at the same time, you had this going on. You had the political space going on, and it was like the perfect example of, like, where you've got one
bad
conversation
behavior being enabled.
You've got one conversation over here where we're trying to hold 16, 15, 14, 17, 18-year-old boys to a high standard, and we can't even do that to our political leaders. Like, and it's like, what hope do you have having this conversation if simultaneously this conversation's going on and no one's being held accountable here? It's just like, it's horrible. It's disgusting. Politicians have fallen so far from grace, if they were ever in grace, to be frank, that the leadership in Australia, America, England, name a country, it's horrible. And what that's doing to society, we're just seeing, time and time again, the detrimental effects of that. But I've said for years, it's going to take the destruction of the old for something new to come through. And what I'm hoping is that these last 12 months, we're starting to see more destruction of this old. We're starting to see politicians being held to higher accounts. I'm a little bit of a pessimist in that realm, where I'm going, I just don't see it changing anytime soon. But here's to hoping.
I'm a little bit more. I'm a little bit more optimistic, because I think sports are really interesting. And this, your dad and I, and I think the three of us have had many conversations about how sport in Australia is a really interesting arena because so much change is mirrored. If you talk about racial vilification, sports led the way. Politicians don't go and champion overhauling racism because it props up a lot of our society. And whereas we've seen, and I think and again, Nathan Buckley, a controversial figure in some ways. I think as he's played a big role in our business at the Fatherhood as someone who, in lots of ways, has been very open about his own fatherhood journey and how he's had to break down a lot of what he inherited from his dad is what fatherhood was. He's had to break that completely and change his style of coaching to be more compassionate, to be more of a father figure, which led to a massive resurgence of Collingwood's success. But I just want to bring Bucks up because this week he again, and this is you talked earlier about how as a parent, sometimes it's not a bad thing to stand up and say, I've made a big mistake. I really fucked this up. And he stood up this week and said, the way I dealt with Heretia was regrettable because I dismissed him and I denied him the chance to talk, to speak his truth. And I think that was such a powerful moment because that's what's happening in politics right now. Scott Morrison stands up and says we need to believe survivors of sexual abuse when anyone's come to him with in moments of desperation saying, please believe me, this has happened to me. He's dismissed and denied. So I think Bucks is actually, hopefully, he's wagging the tail here. Like if sport can stand up and take ownership and be accountable. And I was just really proud of him again yesterday. I think obviously we're all flawed human beings, but I just particularly like the way that especially at that club where Collingwood doesn't have a track record of accountability. I won't go into the review that they did and the way that their president at that time talked about that review was a proud moment, but they don't have a great track record. And for Bucks yesterday to stand up and show the Prime Minister how to do it, it was a great day. And I think you should be a little bit more optimistic because I reckon sport's the thing that leads politics when it comes to change, which is why you and your dad are important people.
Well, if you were to take one thing away from politics in terms of what does it teach people, it teaches people that if you just lie and you lie long enough and you dig your heels in, eventually you can weather the storm and there will be no repercussions. We saw, and
if you're a white male, only if you're a white male, mate.
I could pull 100 different examples out of a hat and to back that up. But the greatest thing, the worst thing about cancel culture, the idea that if you do something wrong, you then get cancelled and you're off the air, and we see it so much in Hollywood and in America and Australia as well. The worst thing about cancel culture is that it breeds that behavior. It doesn't allow you to do what Bucks has done or what certain people have done in the past, where they go, hey, I actually did make a mistake. I'm human because I've made 1,000 different mistakes in my life, and I'm just fortunate enough that I don't have a massive platform that people can cancel me from, right? But I make a shitload of mistakes. So that's what it breeds when you have a society that says, if you make a mistake, we're going to completely shame and vilify you, versus a society that goes, hey, if you make a mistake, please just admit to it. And we as a collective will help drive better behaviors, or here's the way forward. Here's the solution. That's the society I want to live in. I want to be able to say, hey, I fucked up, guys. I'm sorry. What can I do now to be better, right? Versus I've done something wrong.
So do you, just to be devil's advocate here, because I think cancel culture also has its issues as a concept, because I do think Bucks has stood up numerous times and being human, being fallible, and said, and like that's a tough gig, right? Collingwood captain. I mean that Collingwood coach. That's got to be the most vaunted position in the land. Their supporters are so rabid. It's just off with his head. How many times have they said that about Bucks? He survived. So I just want to say, I also think this idea that we should necessarily forgive, because if we bring it back to Australia again, that's happening right now with this politician. And our Prime Minister again is saying, oh, forgive and forget. Oh, he's told me it didn't happen, so I'm not going to cancel him. He's potentially someone that should be cancelled, because there's a big track record. So, you know what I mean?
I mean, you do something illegal, like you sexually assault someone, that's illegal for starters. So let's start with uphold the law.
No, there is a legal framework.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree with you there. Andrew, mate, that's about an hour. Great conversation. I want to end on a high note. As always. I want to end on a high note. What is the one thing that you would give to yourself as a starting out father that you know now that you didn't know pre your firstborn daughter? What is one piece of advice that you could go back in time and go, mate, here, this is a golden egg for you moving forward?
Mate, that is a deep question. But my answer is pretty clear. There's really just one answer to this, and I'll give you a scenario. So we're probably a month in to me being a dad, and my wife said to me, "You're not being the dad I expected. I really didn't expect you just to go back to work so quickly and just to not be here." And she said, "So here's what I'm going to do. You have the baby. I'm going away for the weekend. There's enough milk in the fridge that's been extracted for 2 days. You and Indy, have a great time. I'm off." And she just left me standing there. And I was with Indy, and I was like, shit. Like, I've sort of done a nappy a few times. And because again, I'm not exemplary, mate. Like I've been made into this pretty phenomenal kind of, all singing, all dancing father by a very good partner as well. But she just left me there with everything and said, "No, you'll be good. You'll work it out." And I had to work it all out. And then at the end of that weekend, I was like, shit, I didn't need any books. I just did it my way. It's all in sight. And that was, and then since then I've stopped comparing myself to others. I've stopped any sense of there being some right way. There is no right way to do it. As long as you warm the milk to the right kind of temperature, as long as you don't use warm water out of the tap, which I did until I was told that was really bad. Because there's lead in the water. I learned all these things the wrong way. Hopefully my daughter's going to be fine. But it was so liberating. If I'd go back to that guy, because I was walking around the hallways at Epworth where the baby was born, just on this little trolley, I had the baby. I was walking round and round and round and round when I had my first kid, and I was like, this is all about to begin. I wonder how it's going to be. And I was really excited about it, but I was also super intimidated. And because women are so naturally bonded with their child to begin with, you can feel quite remote in that first month. I would just go back and say to that guy, just get involved in it. And there is no wrong way to do this. There is no wrong way to be a dad if you're caring for your child, and if you're into it, then, and that would have liberated me from probably quite a long period of thinking that somehow other parents were better at it, more engaged. Like the idea that you just do it and just do it in a way that suits the person you are. So that was the breakthrough for me. And then since then, all the guilt went away, because I'm like, no, I'm just doing this my way. It might not be your way. I see that when I look across at another dad, and he's honestly like an SAS dude. He's got sort of bottles here and nappies here, and like on a tool belt, and he's got everything organized. I'm like, geez, that guy's a better dad than me. But then I'll just start singing my kid a song, and there's like shit coming out of my prams back in the day. I was just an absolute mess. So just all over the shop. But my kid and I would start singing a song together, and he'd be like, fuck, can't do that. And that's an example. He's got his shit together with everything organized. I'm over here disheveled. But we're singing a song together, and that kid already knows this song because we've been singing together since she was born. So just do it your way, whatever your way is. And that's and every man then goes, I'm going into fatherhood with confidence because I've got skills, and I'm going to teach. It's going to be my thing.
Awesome.
That's the high. So
I love that, and I'm absolutely pumped, as you know, to one day be a dad. Hopefully, it's not too soon, but in the next 5 or so years, I'll have a few that I'm sure I'll take a lot out of these chats that we've had, and we'll continue to have. So Mate, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for jumping on. I'll put the link to the Fatherhood website. It's just
love that.
fatherhood.com. Correct? Is that correct?
The-father-hood.com. Just put the hyphens in between the words and we're all good.
I'll chuck all the links into the Fatherhood, mate. For any watch lovers who managed to find themselves here, we'll put the link to Time and Tide as well. Mate, when is the next event? Is there an event coming up? What are we...
Oh, mate, we don't have anything scheduled. I think there's a pop-up at Chadstone for Tag Heuer at the moment if you want to come down and see some Porsches, but awesome. That's about it. It's still pretty lo-fi.
Very good, mate. And I'm planning on being back in Melbourne June this year. So can you just organise another Ferrari day for us, mate? That'll be great.
I sure will, mate. Absolutely.
I'll get Herb on it this time.
We don't talk about that.
Have a good day. Cheers.
Thanks, mate.